Let's do this. Hello, welcome to Jessi's Craft Corner. Okay, so these are an Anna and Elsa doll that I got off eBay. They look like they're in decent condition, but the molded torsos won't work for my design, so I'm probably going to do a body swap. The first thing I gotta do though is clean up their faces and remove the paint, so I'll be right back. Now, my plan for these is to style them after some of the original concept art for Frozen when they were still planning on having Elsa be the villain. One of the things I noticed is that there's a pretty extreme height difference between Anna and the Snow Queen, and to get that effect, I decided to use the body of a Ginny Weasley doll. I picked up all the ones I could get my hands on when they went on clearance for $5 at my local Walmart. I guess I'm starting with the shoes. They're actually cut out of some scrap leather that I have lying around. While sewing the shoes together, I was trying to make sure the sides got stitched evenly since leather has a tendency to stretch. I learned this on my first attempt, which was a bit of a failure. I had a moment where I was trying to decide if I liked the stitching better on the outside or the inside. I ultimately decided on exterior. I didn't stitch the shoe up all the way because I knew I would need to be able to slide it over the foot before I stitched it on. And debating inside-outside again. I didn't like that the inside stitching lost the toe point on the shoe. Speaking of which, this is me stuffing the toes to the same end before sewing the shoes on the feet. Start to finish, each shoe took me about 30 minutes. Here's the tiny pattern I draped for Anna's clothing. Now I just need to cut out the fabric pieces, which no one really wants to watch, so here we go. The first thing I'm going to do is attach together the color blocking for each panel before sewing the sleeves and collar to the bodice. Since I'm hand sewing, I thought the color blocking was a little plain and decided to spice it up with some cording. And because enough is never enough, I decided to add some beading because why not? I also added some gold and red cording to the bodice and hat crown to match. And the scrap leather makes a reappearance for Anna's hat. Since I deliberately made the top larger in circumference than the crown to get that poofy look, I went ahead and divided both into quarters so that I could work the difference in an equal way. I also decided I wanted the crown a little shorter, so snip snip. And sewing, sewing, sewing. Let's speed this up. There, top done. On to the flappy thing, whatchamacallit. So I am marking and making small cuts in the crown where the flappies end, so that the ends look nice. Well, that's one side of the flap. Now I gotta do the other side. Alright, so here's the finished hat, just hanging out on Anna's head. Pants, because we believe in pants with our dresses. Start off by sewing along the crotch seam. Technically, you can sew doll clothes on the sewing machine if the pieces are big enough, but I prefer to sew by hand because on this scale it makes a much tighter seam. After the two halves of the pants are attached, I sew down the side seam of one leg. You may not know this, but Snips is my boss. She actually sits right there, just off screen, watching all of my work to make sure it meets her quality standards. Each and every project I make has to receive the Snips stamp of approval before it is considered complete. I'm just trimming up the bottom edge of the leg before blanket stitching the edges to prevent fraying. I do the same to the seam allowance and waistline. Do the same to the second side, but stop the seam about 1.5 inches from the top so it can slide over the doll's hips. Put the pants on the doll and then whip stitch the rest of the way up. Here's what the bodice looks like with the sleeves attached. Flip it inside out, pin it along the sleeves. I'm sewing the sleeves first because I'll use tan thread on the sides. Use extra stitches to reinforce the wrist and then blanket stitch the seam allowance. Repeat on the sides and then flip the sleeves right side out. I popped the hands off so I can make the wrists a tighter fit. I'm just checking the fit to make sure there aren't any mobility restrictions. Now that everything works, I'm sewing the front of the bodice closed. Taking a little break from the dress, I'm stitching on some leg wraps. I decided to use red thread because of the detailing from the concept art. Clip the threads, and then it's time for another mobility test. So far, so good. Slide the skirt up and stitch the remaining 1.5 inches of the back seam. You can see I'm struggling a bit to find a good angle to sew this at. After bumbling around for a few minutes, I did get the back seam sewn and can sew the skirt to the bodice. I decided to stitch some artful folds in the back so it looks nice when I add the waist wrap. Now where the magic happens. You may have noticed that I ended up chopping off her hair. I wasn't really happy with how the braids looked, so I opted to try using yarn wefts instead. I've applied a base coat of MSC before blushing and shading her face. I had to experiment with a few different shades before I found one I liked. I found I always end up needing a much brighter shade than I think I will. I used Prismacolors to add some detail to the face. And here goes freckle attempt number 1. I don't like it, so I erase it and start over. Honestly, when it comes to freckles, I feel like Disney never goes far enough, so I add a bunch to her forehead and the rest of her face. Add a nice highlight to the Cupid's bow, nose, and chin. I'm on my second layer of MSC, and I wanted her eyeliner to be less extreme than it was on the original doll, as well as how it is in the film. I use a light blue pencil to sketch out the pupils before going in with darker pencils to lay out the base colors. third layer of MSC, going to build up my colors and shading a little bit more. Hi Snips. I've found it's a little difficult to use something that's so sketchy as a reference image. If you duplicate it exactly, the face would look extremely flat and lifeless, but I do try and keep the spirit of the illustration. So the pencil I'm using around the edges of the iris look black in the camera, but it's actually an indigo. Inspecting the face for flaws. Well, it looks like I found one, but you will never know what it was because I couldn't stay in frame. Oh look, we're back. Looks like that's it, so I add my fourth and last layer of MSC to seal her face, and then gloss her eyes and lips. I wish I could show you footage of the hair, but as this was my first time using yarn wefts, I had to do some experimenting and chose not to record the progress. I am really happy with how it turned out though. And here's the finished doll. How did I do? I'm currently hard at work on the Snow Queen and will upload the video as soon as I finish. If you're waiting on the last video of my Jasmine doll, I promise it's coming, I just got a bit sidetracked by life. Until then, thanks for watching and have a great rest of your day.